What's up, guys? Welcome back to the RedBeard Outdoors podcast. I'm Jonathan, your host, and here at RedBeard Outdoors, talk about faith, family, fitness, and the outdoors. With that being said, guys, first and foremost, you guys know Troy if you're in the archery world. I want to let you know we dive into some things that people have not hit on with him on the podcast before. Some archery, a lot of family, faith, and fitness as well. So it's not just a full-blown archery podcast. So if you're not into archery, stay tuned for that. You probably don't even know who Troy is. He loves bass fishing, loves God, has very strong opinion about certain things with archery. So we'll get into that. But also for you archery guys, you're going to want to stay tuned because there is something in here that we discussed to kind of clarify a few questions that I've had on other podcasts that I've heard him on and his own content, just to make sure that we're all on the same page as to what he talks about, why he talks about it the way he does. And also, guys, before we get into the podcast, I want to remind you there's only a handful of days left to get into the first Phorm Outdoors Fall Challenge. There are so many things. If you've never downloaded and used the first Phorm Outdoors app for the challenge, you can get the app free. And here's how you do it. Check out the link down below. If you are or have been using the app, get into the challenge. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll make sure that you get hooked up with some goodies as well so that you can get some benefits for getting into the challenge on top of getting a head start into the new year. We're only a quarter away, so 3 months away or less till we hit the new year. Imagine hitting your new year goals with full stride rather than starting from scratch like most people do on January 1. Imagine that. And that's what I want to provide to you with the amazing team over there at First Phorm. You're going to get a one-on-one advisor in the app. You're going to be able to track your food. There's going to be live classes. There's going to be workout programs, things that you guys have seen on social media, on my stories that I'm showing with the sandbags, things you can do from home, things you can do from a full-blown gym. All of that. Check out the link down below, guys. I want you to get entered. I want to see you over there. Now, with that being said, let's get into this podcast with Troy and the Ranch Fairy. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the RedBeard Outdoors podcast. I've got an outstanding guest for you guys today. And actually, right before we hopped on here, we are going to talk about some different topics than what Troy normally talks about.
Yeah, that's going to be fun. Way better.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We'll see if I'm an interesting guest.
Things. Yeah, so if you guys aren't all about the stuff that you've heard about Troy online, then that's fine. I recommend sticking around for this one because we're going to hit on some different topics that are out of the box from his normal conversation that he gets to have on podcasts. But with that being said, guys, you've probably heard of Troy. He's down in Texas. He likes to shoot hogs. He likes to bass fish a lot. You guys may not know
I got
that.
a fishing problem. It isn't even the bow hunting thing's nothing. I got a fishing disorder.
He obviously likes SpongeBob, which is one of the cartoons I grew up on.
Right there, yeah.
And
George Washington back there.
There you go. Maybe we should swap those. You have George Washington behind you.
Yeah, right, with his liberal tears can in his hand. That's awesome.
That's perfect. And then Troy, of course, he's got kids. He loves what he does. He manages a ranch, which is where he got the name Ranch Fairy. But we're going to go into that a little bit more. But first off, for people that don't know who you are, Troy, who are you, man?
Well, I've been married for 32 years and 37 with the same woman. We still get along great. We laugh a lot. We have a freaking fun time. We freak people out at parties. My wife says all kind of random stuff you may or may not want to hear. She likes to make people uncomfortable, and then she turns it up. She's only 5 feet tall, so she's got to make up for it somehow, right? That's how she punches people in the head. And I got 3 great kids. They're all in their 20s. They have jobs. They pay taxes. I made them work at 16. Didn't need to have them to work, but I have an interesting philosophy that freaks people out. If you've never been abused, and I mean abused by customers, and not abused, but abused in a situation you can't get out of, go run pizzas or serve food or get yelled at. If you've never had a bad boss and you've just gone to college and you've never really worked, you don't know what the hell's going on in this world. So I made my kids start working at 16. And I wanted them to I wanted their skin to build. It isn't like pull yourself up by the bootstraps and punch everybody in the face stuff. if you're going to fully develop as a human being, you've got to freaking learn to deal with whatever's coming at you.
Mm-hmm.
So they've all waited tables and run pizzas and done all that stuff, and now they all have professional jobs. But I thought that was an important development skill. We also homeschooled for, I think, till every kid was 10 or 12. I should know that. They are my kids. That's what Julie tells me. And I did that. You know why? One, I wanted them to have a base that was different than the public school system. But two, I wanted them to have a varied educational experience. So they didn't wear shoes for the first 7 or 8 years of their lives, and they were in school. And we ran around and did stuff, went to the ranch and did all kind of stuff, and then they put them in school and they did fine. So my kids have this weird, I'm all about trying to do new things and putting in the work. And then if it doesn't work, you back up and say, okay, well, that didn't work. Take a step to the side and keep going.
Yep.
So that's me, and I have a YouTube channel about archery. It's moderately flammable at times. But that came from, I just said you do something until it fails, and then you take a step back. And I've been shooting a bow and arrow since I was 12, and I'm 55 years old. So do the math. But back in the old days, and then we'll get off the archery stuff for a little bit, we shot 220 feet per second, was screaming. Fingers. We had flipper rests, like fall away rests didn't exist. The whisker biscuit wasn't around. We shot aluminums, and the only broadheads around. I'm old enough that the Thunderhead replaceable blade broadhead was a wow day. That's how long I've been doing this. We had hand sharpenable broadheads, and we never left arrows in animals, ever. It was very rare. And we did not know we were shooting really high energy platforms. We were just shooting what was there. That's all we had. Carbon comes along, everything changes. That's about 1985, probably, it became real. And then I jumped in, got in the speed train, went fast as I could go, and my success rate went down. And so I said, well, hell, that ain't working as good as the old stuff. And so I started bumping up my arrow masses and messing around with some of the stuff in Dr. Ed Ashby's Natal study. And I effectively turned our ranch into a test lab. So one of the things that's misunderstood about me, I like shooting pigs. I shot a 155-inch deer 10 years ago, and I don't care to kill another deer. And I shot him on low fence and legit and all that, no genetics and all the Texas stuff. But I never lost the interest in shooting them. So what the feeders allow me to do is put an animal in a live shooting situation at 20 yards over and over and over and over and over and keep testing stuff, shot angles, whatever. And I started really whacking them to the point now that it's on me. It is bad shot placement or they moved a lot. When I hit them right, they're done. But to pull off of that a little bit, tell me a little bit about your channel and, I watched a lot of your stuff and I clipped here and there the different guests. You got optics, you got exercise, faith, super encouraging stuff for dudes. So tell me the goal.
Yeah, no, of course. So,
RedBeard.
Well, first off, I do want to let people know we're going to get into the archery stuff a little bit because I do have some questions. That
We'll do that. That's easy.
But we'll get there. We'll get there. I don't want to lead with that because I want to keep people in that are interested in hearing a little bit more about who Troy is, rather than just ranch fairy and what you do on the ranch. So, but no, I appreciate you asking me. Honestly, for people that tune in, everyone understands the 4 pillars I try and talk on each podcast is the faith, family, fitness, and the outdoors. That encompasses my whole life. I grew up LDS, Mormon, as people may know. We're Christian. People don't understand that for some reason, and that's okay. But we, Christ is our Lord and Savior, period. I feel like religion is definitely there's different vessels to get back to heaven, to get back to God and Christ. But, the one that I grew up in, surprisingly being in North Carolina where I grew up, my parents converted when I was 1 or 2. And that's just, yeah. And that's, there was, here there's an LDS church. I'm in Utah now. Here there's an LDS church, just like CVS is just about on every corner. Right. Whereas where I grew up in the Bible Belt, there was a different denomination and church.
Yeah,
and
every
religion.
50 yards. And by the bars, exactly. Too. There was a bar and a different denomination. And everybody went in the bar, but didn't look like they knew each other.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so, but I appreciate growing up in that area because it allowed me to not be secluded. I was introduced to different cultures. All of those things helped me grow and develop into who I am. And then I ended up serving a mission for 2 years, similar to what you're telling, your kids to go out and do a service type job at 16. I think everyone should do something like that, either in the food industry or go out and do a service mission if you can afford to go overseas. Yep. I highly recommend you go to a third world country or at least a second world country and see how privileged we are here in the U.S. I feel like a lot of people would benefit from that.
Mark Twain said the greatest way path to humility is to travel the world and immerse yourself into cultures.
Yep.
Because things are just different over there or over here, whatever.
Exactly.
And
so at the age of 19, I served a 2-year mission down in Mexico. I left my family, left college.
No kidding, Mexico. No kidding.
And
like
Mexico
Central Mexico,
City.
Or were you
Mexico
on the Vato
City.
border?
No, Mexico City.
Yep. Oh, right.
Right in the middle. And my favorite, not surprising to anyone, but my favorite area that I went to was the actual mountains that almost bordered Veracruz. So I ended up going more east. And I love the rural areas, the smaller towns, getting to know the people there. The food was even more fresh. Like it just, everything was great. But lived there for 2 years. I'm fluent in Spanish. To the point where people would call us so as missionaries, you go in partnerships or companionships. And so they would call us and they'd ask for the white companion, they'd ask for the gringo. And I'm like, this is me. I'm the gringo. And they're like, no way. Like, I couldn't tell by your Spanish, So I completely immersed myself in there. Absolutely loved it. Came back, and that also helped me become, more the man I am today. There was a lot of different careers that I wanted to go into. I haven't gone into any of them. But, something that I did always know I wanted to be was a dad. Luckily, I had an amazing father. Even though my parents are divorced, he did show us how to treat my mom. He also showed us how to be a good father and be present. He coached us up to his level of skill in all of our sports that we did. He was always there encouraging us to lift weights, to, hard days at work. He talked to us about those. Like, he was just a really good dad. And so I knew that's something I wanted to be. And I've got 5 kids now, so that's something I did accomplish.
and I've got 2 of you. I got 2 redheads with red beards. So you're a 3%er, right? That's 3% of the population. Do you have blue eyes, by the way? Are you like a 0.003%er? Oh yeah, you're a freak. Yeah, some woman needs to get a hold of that. So you're double recessive.
Yeah. Well, my wife is pissed. My wife is pissed because we don't have any redheads. And I told her, I tried to explain genetics to her. I'm like, it's your fault. Like, I donated my genetics. It's not my fault.
Like, I got it. Yeah, my wife my wife's 58 and her hair has changed colors as women do over the years. But now she just let it go out and it's gray. But she was a redhead. And her family's got a real strong redheaded side. And we have strawberry blonde in my side, but not red. And my 2 sons, they're like you, redheaded and all that stuff, and they have a great time. Apparently, my son works in a restaurant that's owned by a bunch of Vietnamese people and people from all over Asia. Ironically, he's like 3. They call him one of the white guys. Right? There's 3 of them, and the rest of the people are from all over Asia. And those guys love redheads, so he's got all kind of trouble he needs to not get into.
Exactly. It's funny. When my daughter is super blonde, and the first time she went over so my brother-in-law is Chinese, and they live out in California. And anytime they go to Chinatown, like, they just want to touch her blonde hair. Like, it's kind of creepy almost. They're not doing it in a creepy way.
Yeah, right.
But like, it's so different, and it means something different to each culture.
My daughter's eyes are pitched like she's got some Chinese in her. Like, and Chinese people up and people from Asia come up to her all the time and say, "Hey, man, you know, you're part of us, bro." And she's like, "Nah, it's just it's a genetic flaw from my dad." But I'll take it because they're not unfriendly, right? And she's blocking and all that stuff too, so it's a lot of fun. We've had a great time. I was raised with a good dad, and the men that are around him are good people. And I got a good sense of it. We were talking earlier before we started that I was fortunate enough in my late 20s and early 30s when the kids were coming along to have some dudes at church just grab me by the neck and say, "Bro, there's other ways to do this whole man thing than what you're doing." And they cared. They weren't trying to prove they were better. They weren't trying to, lord stuff down or push me into a square hole. They let me be me, but they just said, "Hey, man, you can make a few adjustments here. Torque wrench, and get all the bolts torqued right, and you'd probably be better off." And I can't say that they were wrong; they were right.
Yeah.
And I was telling my son this the other day. We were talking in the car, and one of my friends is very direct with my children, my boys. He'll sit them down and say, "This is what you need to do. This is how stuff works." But he's real direct. Like and they've gotten over it. But when he first started doing it, kind of freaked him out. And I said, "That's how he shows he loves you, man. He just doesn't have that softball, Mr. Rogers kind of pitch to him. And I don't really either." I said, "But when that guy tells you something that he says, you're not going to like this, but you need to hear this." And then he just hits you in the head with it. He tells it to me all the time, and I do it to him. And I said, "That's how he tells you he loves you. You need to understand where it's coming from. It's not coming from, he's not trying to beat you over the head or tell you you're wrong. He wants you to be right." And that's a good thing. I mean, that goes with all your fitness stuff and all that comes from a core like that, right? I mean, it's really, really, really solid. More people need that, in my not so humble opinion.
Yeah, well, and the thing with fitness is, you don't have to want to stand on a stage and be a bodybuilder. Like a lot of people might picture fitness that way. You don't even have to go to a gym. This is the first time, I guess maybe by the time this has come out, maybe I've talked about it a little bit more, but I quit my gym because I have enough GoRuck equipment at home and boxes and coolers that I can use, that I'm experimenting a little bit with that because I have done traditional gym lifting for so long. But I do always talk about how, you don't need a gym and you don't need gym equipment to accomplish your goals. And so there's a lot of other ways that might even be more beneficial for people, especially dads that maybe like you work from home like me, but you're still busy. It's not like you're just hanging out, right? And so you have 20 minutes here, or maybe you have 45 minutes when you get lucky, or even when you do have those 45 minutes, your kids need something because it's the summertime and they're home, or whatever it is. And so I'm experimenting with that a little bit and doing garage workouts and slowly building my home gym, so that I can do it, according to what I need. Being able to.
I've modified that to. There's a couple of people I'm 55. So how old are you?
I'm 32.
So. Okay, so about 40, I lost my grip from working, raising kids and all that stuff, and you don't realize how unphysical you are. You're not throwing your friends on the ground and wrestling and jumping on monkey bars and standing on top of moving cars and all the stupid stuff we did. A lot of it was illegal, but more than 7 years ago, and no phones. But having said that, I remember about 40, 42, I was just trying to lift the lid on an electrical box, and I felt all the tendons in my forearms give. My fingers just said, "No, I'm not doing this. Thank you very much." And they straightened out. And I said, something's got to change, right? Yep. So I found out for me and the way my body works, I'm a high velocity. That's where I work best. Lots of reps. I mean, tons of work. Not a lot of weight. I can lift heavy, but it doesn't seem to benefit me let me phrase that differently. I used to lift in the gym and do all the squats and all that normal stuff. And then I realized, what if you like tapered your workouts to what you do every day? So wash a car, run a wrench, pick up a bunch of dirt from Mrs. Fowler's yard, shovel rocks for hours, dig holes. And every hole Mrs. Fowler picks has a pipe in it. So be digging slow because you're going to cut a pipe and then cost yourself some more work. So just warn you on that if you marry Mrs. Fowler and I'm dead. If she tells you to dig a hole, you're going to cut a pipe or wires. So get ready for that. Or there's a lot of days when I go down to the ranch and throw 2,000 pounds of corn in 95 degrees and 100,000% humidity. And I need to be in shape for that. Mm-hmm. So for me personally, lifting a lot I don't pick up 400 pounds very often. I pick up 50 pounds 75 times and throw it. So I've started changing my workouts to durability from here to my knees. Mm-hmm. And boy, it's made a difference in my life. Just saying, what do I do and how would I work out so that works? Mm-hmm. So that's a little thing, a little pro tip I'll throw you guys and gals out there. If you want to get big, get big. I mean, I don't care. Yeah. Whatever your goals are. I just want to be durable.
Yeah, and exactly.
So far it's working. So I've got there's a couple of, ironically, they're both women on YouTube, and they're pistons. Like, I hate my girlfriend. That's what I call her. One of the girls I call her. I said, I'm going to play with my girlfriend. And Mrs. Fowler's like, good luck with that. And they're just machines. Yeah. I mean, shoulder workout for 47 minutes straight, 15-second rest. I mean, you're just dying. And she's still going, he. I'm like, I hate you.
Yep, exactly. And that's the thing too, Troy. It's just, I tell people, what are your goals? Is what I ask them first off. When people come to me and ask me questions, I'm like, I'm not going to compete against someone like a Dan Staton who's been doing CrossFit for years. And he's got, his goals. He makes them very clear, and that's why so many people follow along with what he's got. And for me, on the other hand, I'm like, I'm not going to look like Dan Staton. But what I do want to do is I want to be as physically fit as possible so that my kids know I can go play with them at the park. So they know that I can take them up on the mountain. I can go camping. I'm not a liability. Yeah, I'm not a liability to my family.
Hey, here's what you do with Dan Staton. You get in a 4-point stance against him, and you see who goes backwards. It will not be you. Everybody's got their thing. That's what's funny is, right? Yeah. Yeah. I've told lots of people this. Which part of the football team are you? Mm-hmm. Because the 200-pound guys are not on the line.
Yeah.
And the linemen aren't running the football. Mm-hmm. Because the skill sets are different. So you got to figure out what your deal is. I'll tell you one thing that blows me away, and then you need to ask an arrow question for all the arrow people here in a second. But my sons both do MMA. You watch those guys fighting, not my kids. Mm-hmm. You watch the pro guys fighting, they are genetic freaks. Mm-hmm. The skill sets aside, jiu-jitsu, boxing, kickboxing, judo, etc. Skills aside, the cardiovascular capability of those individuals is not, you come out of the womb with that. Mm-hmm. It's unbelievable to watch those people. I'd sit there and go, everybody likes to see them get pounded on and bloody and all that stuff. I'm sitting there going, the cardio these guys have is unbelievable. Mm-hmm. And they're freaks.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And most of them aren't huge.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. 140, 50-pound guys that will just tear your head off. They're probably super nice and they wouldn't. They're just like, dude, you need to back up. See the cauliflower ear?
Yeah.
Just go, like, move on.
Don't be stupid.
Well.
People like Chad Mendez, for example, and he's one of the nicest guys you'll meet, mm-hmm. but he is a dangerous dude.
Yeah, he's a dangerous. You want him to be your friend.
Yeah, and you talk about that too. I've got a bunch of my scout masters because I grew up right outside of Fort Bragg, mm-hmm. and I knew they were special forces guys. I didn't realize what kind of special forces until I grew up. And now
pretty dark.
And I heard one of them mentioned on the Sean Ryan podcast. he wasn't on the podcast, but a guy that was Delta was talking about his training and mentioned the name of one of my Scoutmasters, which I was like, it's a very standout name. And I texted him, I was like, hey, do you remember, he was a private at the time, and do you remember Private so-and-so? And he's like, yeah, how do you know him? And I just told him, I said, hey, go listen to this chunk of the Sean Ryan podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And he listened to it, was like, oh yeah, I remember that situation. He was going through a rough time, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, and I'm putting the 2 and 2 together. I'm like, oh man, no wonder my parents were okay with me going out in the woods with them for a week.
Yeah,
like,
right.
They were the most dangerous guys out
there.
there.
Yeah, right.
And
the bears are not a problem. The bears are not a problem.
Exactly. But you know, getting back to the fitness thing, it's really a goal centered thing. Like for you, you've got certain goals. I've got certain goals. And as you have, there's some grandparents out there that just want to be able to get off the floor without pain. They want to be able to get down and play with their grandkids.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, so those are all different fitness and health goals. And so that's kind of the plan is you want to stay moving. It's just like with a door. If you leave a door closed, you don't move that hinge for 10 years,
it's gonna
you
squeak.
come back, that hinge is either going to be rusted off or it's going to be squeaky as heck and hard to open. And it's the same with our bodies. If you don't use them in the way that you think you're going to need to use them 10 years from now, when you hit that 10-year mark and it started deteriorating or tightening up or whatever.
I know. Dude,
that's
I know.
just what happens. Mm-hmm.
I'm the poster child of that. All right, exactly. So throw an arrow question in here because I'm sure the arrow people are or whatever.
Let's keep the archery guys entertained, and we'll get back to the faith and friends thing. Yeah, exactly. So okay, so here's you mentioned, I didn't realize you'd been shooting a bow for as long as you have. That's something that is new knowledge to me. So for basically 40 years ish, you've been shooting a bow.
Trad bow for 10, killed 2 javelinas with flint. I've done a lot of crazy stuff.
Right. So, but you're not a big Western hunter. A question I want to ask you specifically is, do you agree, or do you feel like the way that you, or your target specific, like with pigs, is different than shooting an elk or a mule deer where you're going to shoot at 60, 70 yards to kill the animal? Do you feel like arrow setups will be slightly different based on the trajectory of your arrow?
So the pigs have turned into test targets. Just to make that clear, I said that earlier, but I can sit there and shoot it. 95% of this game, by the way, is white-tailed deer. And the Western world is not that big. It isn't. And the access to the West is, that's why I haven't gone West. I hunt out West a lot with friends of mine, and I don't draw and I go with them.
Yeah.
I've bow hunted 3 times for elk. And if you ever hear that I draw a unit and you hear what unit it is, if you're in that unit, leave. There will be no elk. They just leave. They know I'm coming. And they don't think I'm scared. They're not scared of me. They just think I'm going to be loud the whole time and scare F everything. So that's my pro tip for you. If I draw a unit, whatever, 60 in Colorado, don't go there. There won't be any elk. So the more I explore this question, it's a really fair question. I didn't have an answer that was very good other than they're big and it'll probably penetrate better until I shot through a lab radar at 60. The lab radar is up there. I can't get to it. It's a box about this big. All it does is measure velocity, bullet, whatever. So you put the target at like 70 and you set the radar to pick up 20, 30, 40, 50. You have to fly it through it. It can't be at the target. If it hits a target, it'll shake and it freaks out the lab radar. So I said, once again, I said, hey man, I don't know the answer. So I'm gonna go find out. And the downrange energy at 60 yards for projectiles under 500 grains is absolutely horrific. And it's just math. You can be, whoever's out there, if you're insulted or whatever by that, it's fine. It's just math. So I know this off the top of my head. I walked 6 arrows up, 388, 436, 514, et cetera, to 716 grains. And they're not equal because I walked the spine up too so that they would fly. And that's keeping it fair. The launch momentum of a 436 grain arrow is less than the impact momentum of a 589 grain arrow at 60 yards. So at the bow, the 436 grain arrow has less momentum than the 589 at 60. I did not expect that.
Okay.
And it just jumped off the page, and I was just like, oh my God. So now we're going to take a deer setup, okay, whatever that is, and we're going to go out west because we want to shoot far. And our momentum is a ballistic dud, comparatively.
Let me pause you there real quick, though, Troy. So I want to ask two things real quick, just because these are questions that have come up for me when I've heard you on other podcasts.
Yeah, sure, yeah, shoot.
So with you're saying 586 grain arrow, 500.
That one happened to be 589, where it laid out with spine and all that.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So 589. What's the draw length, and what is the poundage of the bow?
65 pounds.
Okay.
It's the fastest bow I've got. It's a really aggressive dual cam bow with a really short brace height, 28.5-inch arrow.
Okay.
I'm pretty normal size. I'm 6 feet tall and 190 pounds. A little fat right now in the summer, but I'm having the fattest summer of my ever. But anyway, usually summer is hot, so just sheer you can get free weight loss. This year, I don't know what the hell's going on. Too many bagels. But so I'm pretty standard dude. I'm not shooting 80, right? Kind of, but that platform runs for me shooting it. The 388 grain arrow runs 296.
Okay. And what's
then
your
it
draw
walks
length?
down
If you don't mind
hill
me
from
asking,
there.
are you like a 29, 30-inch draw?
I'm 28.5.
Is your draw length, or you said that was the arrow length as well?
Oh, the arrow length's 30.25 tip.
So you cut it a little long.
Okay. Well, that includes the notch spacing, and I got a little bit of an insert out there in the front, and then the field point. So, but the carbon to carbon is 28.5.
You're saying
my draw length 28.5.
Did you say 290 something feet a second?
At 388 grain, that's the lightest arrow in the set.
Oh yeah, no. Sorry. So you're shooting 28.5-inch draw, 65-pound bow, and you're shooting the 589 grain arrow is hitting.
It's probably going.
Momentum.
I think it was going 230 at the bow.
Really?
But my light arrow, to go back to the velocity thing and shooting far and all that, my lightest arrow was 388, and it was going 296.
Yep.
So it's a pretty fast bow, but it's not one of the real screamers. I know there's faster stuff out there. It's the fastest thing I've got. The data's the data. If you gave me a bow that went 320, the data would be the same.
Okay.
The momentum would be a little higher here. Momentum would be a little higher on the light arrow, and it would just be. It's just math.
Let's dive down the rabbit hole, though, because, and I try and highlight this for people. I'm not an expert, guys, first of all, but second of all, I know enough to be dangerous. And with a rifle, it's the shock factor. It's the trauma that's caused. You don't want two holes. That's what you want out of a rifle when you kill something. With a bow, you want as, two holes or as big of a hole as possible, because it's blood loss, and that kind of issue is what's causing the deer to die. The height, I always forget the name of it. The
cardiogenic shock is your ideal condition.
Yes. So basically blood pressure loss and lots of blood out of the body.
Or internally. It doesn't matter where the blood goes.
Yeah. So, and sometimes even internally could be better because it's causing pressure against the lungs and not allowing.
To clarify on that, your blood and your antifreeze are the same thing in your car. It's a closed loop. You put a nick in your antifreeze hose and drive about 5 miles, and your engine's going to melt because there's no more antifreeze. So where the blood leaves this cardiovascular system after arrow or bullet penetration doesn't matter as far as efficiency of distance traveled. The system is closed loop. It only has X volume of blood, and the faster it gets out of the system, it doesn't matter where it goes, outside or inside. You're right, though. If you want to be coarse about it, it'd be drowning in your own blood. But because that's exactly what occurs if you didn't. If none of the blood escapes, it just fills up the chest wall. The lungs fill up with blood, and it's bad for your life.
A brief interruption here. Again, guys, I want to remind you about the first Phorm Outdoors Challenge. get in on that. And also the First Phorm Outdoors Facebook group. Come and join us over there. When I say get in on the challenge, join me on the challenge. I will be doing this challenge as well with you and sharing that information with you on how my challenge is going as well. Because I got to kick my butt into gear as well and lose some of this flab that I've just let happen, guys. Let's just be honest here. It hasn't been a priority to eat correctly, and I will be changing that with this challenge and with you. So join us with the challenge. Come and join us over on Facebook at the First Phorm Outdoors Facebook group. And if you're into any gear, if you need last minute gear, go to BlackOvis, use code RedBeard10, save some money, or GoRuck gear, or any of the other gear that I've talked about that I use, partners of the show I trust and believe in. Save yourself some money, support the show, and go down below and use the links and the codes to save yourself some money. Now let's get back into this podcast with Troy and the Ranch Fairy.
Very efficient for tracking, though. They don't go very far. So
Yeah.
that's a good thing. So
with that, I highlight that because you're using the term momentum, and I want people to be able to distinguish the difference between kinetic energy and momentum, because there is a difference. Because again, if people are coming from rifle and going to bow, you don't necessarily need momentum with the rifle. You're looking more at that kinetic energy style, where how much energy is being transferred into the chest cavity of the animal versus momentum. And explain what momentum means to you, why you highlight that rather than kinetic energy with a bow.
So in Newtonian physics, momentum is a directional. It's the only directional energy factor that they calculate that we use. So kinetic energy is directional, is no direction. It's every direction. And by the way, all arrow bows are constant KE at the bow. You add mass, you cut velocity, it's 1/2 mass times velocity squared. So when you add mass, velocity goes down. The KE curves on that data set, the heaviest arrow is 2 foot-pounds of kinetic energy higher at the bow than the light arrow, but not downrange. Anyway, I'm backing up. Momentum is a directional force that keeps things moving. This is why trains go through cars and cars slam into each other and they tend to stay in the same spot. That's a very, very extreme example, but it's really hard to slow trains down because they're so freaking heavy. So what you want is something that doesn't want to stop. Bullets are rotating 300,000 feet per second. They have this spin-off energy when it hits the skin and causes hydrostatic shock. We do not have that. And the FBI actually did a very deep study on that because they were struggling with pistol rounds and stopping people who needed to be stopped. And they found out that does not occur under 2,300 feet per second. It's on the internet. You can read in great detail about that. So you wanted either a high mass projectile like a 357 Magnum, got the pop, or you wanted faster bullets, but it's got to be above 2,300 feet per second. We're 10% of that. So the only thing we have is to cut a long wound channel. So you want the longest wound channel you can get through the most organs at any angle. I'll give you a crazy example. I need to get Giannis at Meat Eater to send me these clips. I went nilgai hunting with Giannis, 2 years ago or something. Nilgai are like a 3/4 bull elk. 500, 400 pounds, pretty long, built like a horse. They're real squat and short, but thick, man. They're real tall. And they were released by one of the big ranches in South Texas like 70 years ago. They're running all over the place, and they're feral and don't have laws and all that. Cool animal, great to eat. So he was shooting 650 grains. He was shooting a single bevel broadhead. I don't remember which one. I think it was a tough head. Or it might have been my head. I don't know which one it was. But anyways, one-piece steel. And he hit a nilgai. They were rutting, and they were chasing this cow around. And this one just walked in front of him out of his mind, right? Because they've been fighting, and the thing's walking away from him. He shot it right in front of the hip. And he got 40 inches of penetration. I measured it with a tape.
Mm-hmm.
The broadhead was right here, and the skin was sticking out. The nilgai went 60 yards.
Yeah.
Because it went right through the center, cut the top of the heart off, got both lungs, and hit all the major arteries in the neck, and then it looked like a bullet. It didn't exit. The first 22 inches of penetration was the stomach.
Mm-hmm.
So if he'd have gotten 3/4 of an arrow in that nilgai, he'd have thought he had a dead nilgai. Nope. It probably would have died, but not today.
Yeah.
And the last 14 inches of penetration from the diaphragm forward was what killed it. So in that particular shot on a great big animal like an elk, their stomachs are, I bet an elk stomach's 3 times the size of a basketball. What do you think? I mean, it's got to be huge.
Yeah.
So if you took 3 basketballs and kind of made them shape kind of round, I don't know, 16 inches of stomach, end to end, side to side.
Yeah. Liver's
hiding in there. And you haven't really hit anything super lethal should you take a really hard cording away shot. Like you call a bull, and it's a satellite bull comes in, they start wrestling around with each other, whatever, and he just walks by and takes off and goes after him, and he's 17 yards, and you shoot him right in front of the hip because that's the angle. Mm-hmm. You got to penetrate 3.5 feet. Yep. So I wish we could have tested put a mechanical broadhead on the same arrow and shot it in the stomach and seen if the resistance of all that, because this stomach was full of grass.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's
saying
the
it
other
would
thing too,
or would not have penetrated. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Right? But we just didn't. He shot it on the last day of the hunt, and we had to get the hell out of there.
Well, so with that, we're going to announce Troy's new mechanical broadhead. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, right. I think somebody's going to come up with one that is the best out there. Yeah. There's too much money in it, right? Mm-hmm. So somebody's going to come up with one that is really, really, really good. I should probably design the dadgum thing because I know what to do with it.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, like, and what's interesting is when you reached out to me about being on the podcast, like, I was interested because I'm not a huge fixed blade, like your style arrow dude. I'm usually, every arrow I've shot has been 450 grains or less. I think my heaviest has been 480. I'm a 28-inch draw, 70 to 80 pounds, depending on the bow. And so I'm pretty in that average range. And, you know, I don't know. It's interesting though, the way you talk about it. I find these little things in the way you speak, and I want to highlight those, like with momentum versus kinetic energy and such, because those things matter. And I think people get wrapped up in the details of how heavy you talk about arrows, but the reason why behind it. I mean, it makes sense to me. Doesn't mean that you can't have success with a lighter arrow.
Of course, we know 1 million animals are killed every year with 400 grain arrows. I've done it, and I've also suffered with them. Mm-hmm. And the more I shoot through them, the shorter the tracks seem to be. One thing that I have noticed, and I've had multiples of people tell me who shot a lot of deer, when they finally let's just go to 550. Let's not go. Mm-hmm. I shoot 713 as my biggest big boy adult. If I'm going elk hunting or something, I'm shooting the big stuff, but they're bear shaft, noctune, perfect flight, 50-yard arrows, and they're hammers. But from the Ranch Fair store and from most people, I'm pulling them from 425 to 550. Mm-hmm. And I'm encouraging them to noctune, bear shaft, spend some time with the arrows, try to get them consistent, learn to sharpen, and do a lot of detail work on the accuracy of the whole system. So one of the things that's misunderstood, I'm getting ready, I'm going to Africa. So I'm putting a few arrows together. But we're going to do some testing over there, and testing sucks because you break a lot of stuff. So I got to take a lot of arrows. But this is, I shoot feathers because it gives me free forward to center. So these fletchings weigh 6 grains total. Wow. One vein weighs 6 grains. Mm-hmm. So I've taken 25 grains off the back of the shaft just shooting feathers. So my forward to center goes up some. So every one of them That is I bare shafted that shaft. That is a noctuned arrow. Okay. Inserts installed. This has a 200 grain point. This shaft, this is my fart around pig hunting arrows, and they're 600. But that's what flies best for me. My bow loves this. I can just go out and easily noctune with a 200 grain point, 100 grain insert, a 250 spine Sirius Apollo. My bow loves that combination. So why would I go to 550 or 650 when this 614, I mean, it is a bullet hole in paper, and I can just easily tune, right? So one of the misunderstandings is everybody's like, well, that guy just says go as heavy as you can, and nobody's listening.
Yeah.
I want you to shoot a bunch of different arrows and points. A couple of spines is really helpful. And see what your bow wants to eat. And bare shafts are phenomenal truth detectors.
Yep.
To be real honest, I think bare shafting is probably the best. It will expose your bow more than it will expose you. If you got a little cam lean or your timing's off, rest is launching kind of weird. And then one thing that's interesting is I get a lot of people saying, hey man, I shot through the bare shaft kit. I had 300s and 250s, and a 250 with a 100 grain insert, 150 grain point is like ice cream. I say, great. And they fletch, and the arrows don't fly. Guess what that is? Rest contact, table contact. So it once you start seeing the bare shafts, and then you put fletched on, you start to see this really perfect arrow flight, and you see it. So I've learned more about bows from bare shaft than I have guessing with a draw board and all that. Just shoot a bare shaft.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I do want to, before I forget, to ask you about this, because it is something that, because you said this is my 50-yard arrow. So that makes sense to me. Like if I'm shooting closer distances without brush in the way, without, a tree overhanging a limb that you're not seeing at 70 yards, it makes sense to not worry about the arc or trajectory of that arrow. Now I have heard you talk about, walk back tuning and seeing the momentum, like what you talk about, how it carries. But at the same time, I've also seen it personally where the heavier arrow does have an arc versus a lighter arrow is more laser beam per se. It still has an arc, but it's a less drastic. With people hunting out west where they are taking those longer shots and potentially nicking an overhanging branch that they're not seeing, what do you have to say about those type of shots that are the 60, 70?
So everybody acts like everything's above. There's stuff on the ground too. You could go over the top of it. So I think you're about a 50-50 chance of having something high as you are low. So
just
I
based
think it's
on
a
where you're hunting
point.
at.
Do what?
Based
if
on
you're
where
in
hunting
that dark timber stuff, I've been in the dark timber with elk, and those pine trees are pretty. Like there's a lot of space from all the snow up high, right? I didn't see a lot of trouble. I have more trouble at the ranch than I do because the trees are real bushy. So they're all over the place, right? And so I'm not a big advocate for the 70-yard stuff. I think that is being popularized by a certain subset of humans that can do that crap. And that's fine if they can, but I don't think everybody can. I just don't believe it. I just don't think everybody's as good as they think they are. You go 3D shooting, and you don't count your misses as lost animals. You just laugh at your friends and wear your flip-flops and say, well, you suck, or whatever. And I'm a 50-yard guy, man, I don't know if I should shoot that far. It'd have to be an ideal situation for me to shoot that far. Just, I don't shoot that good. When I back up, it gets a little wild out there, and my arrows are flying good. My form just sucks. And what it is I probably should shoot 70 more. I think that would fix it.
And the reason I bring that up, man, is just because I don't feel like that gets touched on enough, and people have brought it up to me whenever we do, they ask me about arrow weights and stuff. I tell them
Yeah.
what I run. They've, people bring up your stuff, and I say, well, look, I've never once heard Troy say that he shoots out at that distance. Now,
Yep.
for me personally, I've killed multiple animals at 70 yards, 60,
Wow,
70
that's
yards.
awesome.
And I've gotten full pass throughs. Now, here's the difference though. I train at 100 to 150 yards frequently.
So you get a pass through every time at 70 yards?
I have, yes. With
Well, then keep
mechanical
doing what
or
you're doing.
fixed. Exactly. And that's what I'm saying, is that people get stuck on, well, Troy says you have to, and I'm like, okay, well, and that's what I wanted to highlight in this, is that one, you're not advocating for further shots necessarily. If you can, you can, great.
Personally, it's just not.
Right. And but I don't think that's ever been touched on in a podcast that I've heard you on anyway.
No, it's not been brought up. It's very astute of you to say that. Well, thanks for doing it, because I have trouble with the momentum stuff that far out there, especially with mechanical broadheads. I just cannot.
Right.
I can't justify it. If you hit anything other than perfect, oh my God, it's going to be a long day, man.
My first elk right here, right? So I haven't killed multiple elk. I've killed deer and other things and gotten pass-throughs on all of them. But this guy right here, I shot a 2-inch mechanical, and it was 70 yards with the cut. I think line of sight, he was 84. And so it was a steep downhill shot, 70 yards, and he was bedded. But I knew in my mind, I'm shooting a mechanical. I'm not going to aim for the shoulder. One, he's bedded. So knowing the anatomy, he's got a steel plate right there. Let me aim for
absolutely. His shoulder was down.
Yeah, exactly. So let me aim for the 2 lungs and liver and pop the diaphragm, right? And so perfect shot placement, like what you were saying. I trained at different angles. I knew my third axis was on. Everything was flying right. All of those things come into play before you go out there. Like, don't just go out there and be like, oh, I screwed broadheads on yesterday, I'm hunting today.
Absolutely.
I'm getting excited because it's a 6-point that's coming in. He's screaming his head off, but he's 60 yards. I'm going to shoot him. And it's like, well, no, don't do that either.
Right.
Don't be stupid. But I did want to highlight that, because I feel like you have never hit on the fact that you're not comfortable personally shooting out past 50 yards on an animal.
I don't think 80% of humanity should be doing it.
Yeah. No,
but there's guys like you who are going third axis and getting all crazy with all the detail. Like I do a lot more bow tuning than people realize. People think I'm a bow tuning idiot, but I mean, who sits around and shoots a dozen arrows and noctunes every one of them? It's boring.
Right. Yeah.
To sit there and just go, keep turning the knock until it shoots a bullet hole. You just set it down, you mark it. And then you got to fletch them all, right? I go to tremendous detail to make sure my arrows are flying awesome. And then I shoot broadheads right after that, and I check it again. And one of the things I do is, unless I'm just pig hunting, my serious arrows I was talking about over there, they haven't been shot. I've got 3 shooters, field point arrows, and I've got 6 broadheads. They're stropped. I don't shoot them. They're JB welded together, so they're not coming up. I can't get them apart. I JB welded the threads into the insert, and I JB welded the heads onto they're glue-on tough heads. They're this broadhead, but they're glued on, so I can't get them apart. And I never intend to. They're hunting arrows, but I never shoot them. I don't want any nicks in them. I don't want any dings in them. I don't want to knock that's a little wonky. And we've been seeing some, I don't know if you get this. Do you ever get cracks in the back of the shafts from shooting them a lot?
Well, I had one happen where the front, like you could see here, this insert's just fine. If it would focus on not my face, there we go. But back here, and that went into some rocks though. But the insert was fine. Everything up front's fine, but this is shaft. The back of the shaft is cracked here.
Okay, so I've watched for that. That's why I don't shoot my arrows and then put broadheads on them. I tell people all the time, if you get a dozen, get 3 with broadheads that fly perfect, sharpen them, and put them away, and hunt with those. Don't shoot your arrows every day and then strap broadheads on them. They're gonna have flaws, and it's gonna all of a sudden Murphy's gonna pop up and go, whoa,
Yes, exactly. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. I agree, and
Bow hunting
that's what I
sucks
tell
because
people.
it's so
Yeah,
meticulous.
yeah. Oh yeah.
There's so many details.
Even and if you're not used to shooting in layers, but you know you're going to go hunting in November, December, put your
Hmm.
layers on. Go
You
shoot with
better
your
put your
layers.
clothes on, your
Shoot
chest
you.
rig, your
Yeah.
light, your. You
Mm-hmm.
better shoot just like you're hunting. You better put your backpack on. I
Yep.
found that on my backpack that the straps were flapping, and I was
Mm-hmm.
practicing and it caught in the string. Well,
Yep.
I promise you, you squat down behind a tree, you just change your whole body position. All them straps are going to change position. They're going to catch, and your 7-day elk hunt's going to have one shot. And the
Exactly.
strap caught the string, and the arrow went left about 7 feet. Or gut shot the damn thing. That would be horrible,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
To hit one bad because of something like that
Yep.
would be, saddening. That would be horrible.
Yeah.
You get all
Yep.
wound up and excited about going elk hunting. In some states, you only have weeks to do it. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
real compressed.
Yeah.
So that would be a no-go experience. But you are
Yeah.
absolutely correct. If you're shooting 120, then it's, you make 70 look like a chip shot. And as long as what you're doing is working, I'm not going to tell you not to. I have people all the time who message me and say, "Hey man, I agree with all the stuff you're saying, but I've shot like 7 deer with a mechanical broadhead." Okay, well, call me when you're done, when something happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I've
and the
been on
thing is too,
multiple
like,
podcasts I was on with Dudley and Aaron
mm-hmm.
Snyder and some of the real good shooters. And I think Snyder's wired a little different. I think from what I can tell, he's just good on meat. He doesn't stress out
Mm-hmm.
in a hunting situation. And the best guys in the world who constantly go like this aren't helping anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here to help an average person shoot a deer that has 3 kids and hunts 10 hunts a year. And half of
Mm-hmm.
them, they're coaching baseball at noon, and they kind of hope they don't shoot a deer because they don't know how they're going to get that figured out because it's 85 degrees.
Yep. Yep.
And that's my whole thing. The world elite guys who are just nails. Okay, fine. I can't throw a baseball 90. I can't dunk. I can't run a 4.340. I'm an offensive lineman. I can hit a golf ball a long way. And I love shooting doves with a 410 because it's more fun. And I'm pretty darn good at that. You do not want to put a $100 bill on the deck and get one box of shells and shoot against me with a 410 at dove field. I've shot a shotgun a lot, right? So everybody's got their own skill sets.
Mm.
And if it's working, do it. If it's not, and you bonk one, or it's struggling, or your arrows are flying sideways, Troy at ranchfair.com. I will help
Yep.
you straighten that stuff. But
I love it.
that's a great question. A good subset of data from you. I like that. That's good.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a
And
long way,
again,
70 yards.
it is, but when you practice at further distances, it seems a lot easier,
Yeah.
and so that I had never heard that brought up with you, and so I wanted to get that information out there just because you've got all the other information. I don't want to go all way down the rabbit hole with you like you have on other podcasts because
Mm-hmm.
that information's already out there. I
Mm-hmm.
love listening to other podcasts before guests come on, and
Yeah,
like
that's why
yourself, where I'm like,
I go watch everybody's stuff and go kind of
yeah,
see what's going on. That's why I asked you about more
exactly.
about in depth on the podcast because yours was pretty varied.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I
your
like to
data
spread
is
out a little
real
bit.
varied. So that's
Yeah.
why I wanted to know what's under the umbrella. What's the umbrella?
Well, and the thing is, I'm not and I'll never portray myself as an expert in anything. I mean, I've been
Right.
shooting a bow for 5 years,
Mm.
and in that time I've killed a handful of animals, and I've learned what I've learned, but I'm constantly loving to learn more on these
Mm-hmm.
kind of things. But with that, let's pivot back a little bit more to something that we talked about, at the beginning of the podcast where we talked about the faith and the family aspect where you
Mm-hmm.
said you had your church and there were some guys in your church that kind of lifted you up and said, "Hey, we like you. We know you've got more potential. Let's
But
get you there."
dot.
Yeah, exactly. So I heard something recently where, and I think it just barely came out, but the Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson podcast
Mm-hmm.
that they just barely did. And Jordan Peterson, like, a lot of it was information I heard before, but he brought up something that that was really interesting to me. And he said, the typical conservative mindset is head for the hardest path because that's what you should do. That's what you need to do. That's going to get you the best results.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, that's right. It's not that that's wrong, but it's how do we portray that to our young men and women as they're growing up? Because especially young men, they don't want to hear life is even harder, go down this path. They want to go down the easier path until they realize that that's not the best way to go. And he said something along the lines of, you need to portray it as the greatest adventure is going to get you the best results in the end. Yep. So instead of saying that's the hardest way, because really the greatest adventure is the hardest adventure, but instead of portraying it like that, saying it's the greatest adventure. And then he brought up, a movie that we actually just watched the whole series with our kids throughout the last couple of weeks of The Hobbit all the way through The Lord of the Rings. And he talks about the analogy of, Bilbo Baggins, comfortable at home, chilling out, and then Gandalf shows up and kind of shoves him into this adventure where he finds out his skill level, he finds out what he can do, he ends up overcoming and learning a whole lot and enjoying life more. Yep. And so, you talked about the men around you, and then I brought up, my friends. I look around me, I'm like, man, I'm so blessed to have the friends that I do because they're all better than me, and I get to learn from them. So how has that changed your life as far as being a dad, in your faith, in your marriage? You've been married for as long as I've been alive. I felt like 10 years being married is a long time, which it is nowadays, but 32 years of marriage and 37 years with the same woman, that's not.
And we're still having a great time.
Yeah, exactly. You haven't scared her off yet. So
I tried.
Or maybe she just
tried
hasn't
to scare
found
me
other
off a
people
couple of times, run me off, she needed to. Smart. She is smart.
She hasn't. Maybe that's why she has you digging those holes that hit pipes and wires. She's hoping one day.
This boy's dumb
you're
enough to do yard work. I'll keep that idiot around. He fixes things. So,
but yeah.
Mostly, probably the greatest thing that those men introduced to me biblically was the concept of having a greater purpose than just sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Like you have a reason you're here. You need to go find out what that purpose is. And my purpose is leadership, and I am that guy that will tell you and the kids what needs to be. They need to hear, not in a professorial way, but I'll see something and I'll send it. I've got a text stream with 12 boys on it, whom I've mentored them all, their nephews and my sons. My sons will just grab their friends and put them on there. You listen, old man, once in a while. Me and my brother will do this. And randomly, I'll just be reading C.S. Lewis or something, and something will show up. And I'll screenshot the stuff and say, hey, whatever the lesson is for that day, just give this some thought. Whatever you do with it, I can't control that. But I'm going to speak my mind. Because if you don't, they never hear anything except for the microphone. And God knows we have the square thing in our hand telling us all the time how great we are. And whatever you watch, you're getting more of, right? So whatever rabbit hole they're in, I just hope to have an influence for them to be grown-ups. I really want them, I tell them all the time, if you're going to be a man, this is definitely something you should consider. This could be women, drugs or not. I mean, I go all over the place. It's because of those guys at the church who do the same for me. They set the example. And I went, I'm dumb enough to say whatever I want to say to people. And I brought this up earlier, but I didn't finish. So we got to talk about something else, no big deal. I was talking to my son the other day. He's 22. He's getting ready to go to Vietnam. He's my traveler. He went to Europe for 2 months last year. And he's going to Vietnam for a couple of weeks. He loves to travel and eat weird food and just be somewhere else. So he's leaving on the 30th. And I don't know why this came up. But we were talking about my buddy Chris, who just says direct things to them. And that's how he shows you he loves you. I don't know if you agree with this. You might not. But I think it takes humility as a man to tell another man what he needs to hear. If you care, it takes humility, not an overbearing, mean-spirited comes from a position of either authority or dislike, which is terrifying. I told Thomas, I said, yeah, it takes a lot. You have to be humble to want to do that for people. And it's hard for dudes to just say to each other, either, you know, the hardest thing people to say to each other, good job. Great job. I'm proud of you. How many men say that to each other? Nobody says that crap. They want to light you up on the message boards and do all the negative stuff. I get tons of positive stuff, but I'm just saying, interpersonal relationships, men have a hard time saying good job or noticing somebody's good at something, maybe way better than they are. My view of this world is when I see somebody way better than me, I go, hey, show me that.
Yeah, seriously.
I'll give you an example. My middle child barely graduated from high school. They said he had a learning disability. And he's like me. He just learns different. He actually told one of his teachers, if you give me a rhomboid in my hands, I'll get it, but I can't do it 2D. And they said, sorry, well, we have his books. So he went in the construction world, and he is absolutely a genius with tools and putting things together. It's like God put the blueprints of everything in his head. I can tear the front end off my truck, put him in a chair. He didn't see me take it apart, and he'll put it back together. He's that guy. Barely graduated from high school, right?
Yeah.
He goes to work in construction. In a year, he's working on new buildings in Denver, Colorado. He's running a crew of 6 guys, and nobody's under 40. He's 22 years old. Because he said, I said, why are you running the crew? He said, because I make decisions.
There you go.
He goes, I see what needs to be done, and we do it. And everybody said, well, that guy just kind of makes decisions. Fast forward 4 years. First of all, working on things, he's not. Teaches me stuff all the time. He's my kid. So should I be a dad and bow up and say, this is the way we're going to do it? Or should I say, hey, man, how should I do this? And he'll have something that's 2 steps or 3 steps way more efficient. Because he's seen all this stuff. And there's something wrong in man world when it's more important to you to be right than to be right in your own way, whatever that is, then do it the right way or put in the work to figure it out. There's something wrong with that.
Yeah. No, I definitely understand, you know, and I don't understand what I don't understand is the idea, and it's kind of been passed down generation after generation of just being right. You have to be right. And I've tried to ingrain that into my kids just through my example of when my kids ask me something, I'm like, I don't know, but let's look it up.
Yeah, right.
Because I don't know everything, and I don't want to pretend like I know everything.
That's correct.
And also when there's been times where I've blown up at my kids because I'm like, no, I know for a fact this is right.
Yeah, that's right.
And then,
that's right.
And then later I find out I was wrong.
You got to go tell them.
You
got to go tell them, man.
Yep, exactly. Especially when there's bad feelings involved with it. When you got upset, you have to be able to go back and show them, hey, I'm wrong.
That's right.
You know, dad's not always right. And I try and bring that, I hate to say generational curse, but I think it's widespread generational curse of just the man is right. You don't disrespect him. He says what he says. And I think that's the wrong way to look at things for sure.
Oh, it's a wrong way to look at everything. Yeah. And then you as a person need to just back up every once in a while. And in any interpersonal reaction, the mirror is a good place to look first. Because you're half the problem. If there's a problem, you are half of it. Probably,
if not more than half. Yeah, yeah,
and,
exactly.
You know, back to it's funny. You see my content, and I get a little wild and say crazy stuff and all that stuff. I'm constantly exploring. I just got a crossbow. I don't know anything about those things. Just open up this whole new place to go play. All this knock tuning and bear shafting and all that stuff. I've spent hours failing. I'm constantly trying to progress. I'm constantly trying to make things better and help people simplify the topics, whether that's with my kids and their lives or with what I do, helping people. I'm the guy in the neighborhood that the kids drive up in their cars making a weird sound in the driveway. I make them work on it. I don't fix it. You want to fix it? You're going to fix it. And
Mm-hmm.
we'll screw it up and we'll figure it out. I don't know everything. We'll sure try. YouTube's awesome. We'll find it there. But
Yeah.
it's you're really not doing anything. You're not leaving a very good legacy when it's always your way or the highway. It's really not a great legacy. It's just a terrible thing you're going to leave behind. You're going to leave behind people who think that they have to be right all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And those people are very, very difficult. One of the greatest, you'll see this when your kids grow up. I'm pretty confident because it's what it sounds like you're doing with them. Some of the greatest moments I've had in the last 5 to 7 years is my kids' advances when they call you and ask you, what do I do about this? I want to ask for a raise. I'm having trouble with this guy. They call you. You've done something right when they're calling the old man. Right? It's awesome. It'll make the hair stand up on your arms when your kids call you for advice.
Yeah.
One of my nephews called me the other day and said, hey, I'm planning to get married. How do I do this? Come on, man. You've done something right. Because if you're that overbearing sledgehammer, I'm always right, scary guy, they're not calling you.
No.
Because all they're going to get sledgehammer. Just figure it out. You know? And that's, why would you want to do that? You know everything. Yeah. Well, excuse me. You're 30 years ahead of your kids. 28 to 35 years ahead of my kids. And brother, I broke a lot of stuff in life. All kind of stuff. Why wouldn't you help them not? And I'll give you one example. I'm not a college guy. I have 2 degrees. I don't think college is, unless you've got some super specialized skill like a doctor or something like that, I think you should go to work after high school and go get your nose bloody and try to figure some stuff out for about 5 years.
Yep.
Go out there, pay some bills, and be single. I tell my kids that all the time. I said, dude, when my son called to say if he was going to Europe for 2 months, I said, yes. What's next? He's like, that's it? And I'm like, yes, you're 21. No dog, no woman.
Mm-hmm.
Go. You're not going to do it again. You're never going again. You don't go now. But I'm not, like I said, my daughter has a 4-year degree. My middle child has a journeyman plumber's license. He's getting his master's. And that's an 8-year deal to get a master's license in plumbing. And my youngest child doesn't know what the hell he's going to do. And I said, enjoy the time.
Yep.
He makes a great living. He pays his bills. He's not irresponsible. I said, well, it's done that for a decade, man. One of these days you're going to get a woman and a house and all that, and then adulting sucks.
Exactly. Yeah, I tell them it's a trap. You don't grow up. Don't grow up.
Don't grow up. It is super rewarding.
It is important. Right? It's important for the kids to be comfortable with themselves as well. I challenge my kids too. When we're talking about things, they'll bring something up that they've heard in school or with their friends or whatever, and going through the identity stuff that's going on right now, which I feel like it's the new goth nerd preppy all of that, and so you just got to identify with something, right? So one of my kids came to us a couple years ago and was like, well, I identify as this, and I said, okay. I said, honestly, I don't even know what that means, and I'm not trying to be a jerk, but talk to me about it, explain it to me. Exactly. And he couldn't, and I said, look, again, not trying to be a dick, but if you can't explain it to me in our safe home with someone who you can have a conversation with, what's going to happen when someone picks on you about it? You're going to close off. You're not going to be able to defend yourself. And I said, all I want you to do is be confident in whatever it is that you're wanting to be and be happy. I said, but let me, and then once we had that part of the discussion, I just pointed out to him, I was like, look, I've noticed these changes before you brought them to me. I was waiting for you to come talk to me about it. Anytime you're doing anything different than what you used to do, you look very uncomfortable.
Yeah, right.
And he was like, oh. And I pointed it out to him, you're very confident. You stand with your chest high. You've got broad shoulders. You just stand there very confident when you're doing these things. But when you're doing these things, your shoulders are rounded, your head's down, you're kind of sheltered. And he was like, oh. And I said, I've been watching.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
I love you, and I've been waiting for someone to pick on you because I was going to deck them, you know.
Yeah, right. Of
but,
course.
you know, the thing is just having those conversations, the open dialogue, like you said, you want your kids to be able to call you, talk to you about what's going on, and be comfortable with that rather than the sledgehammer of no, you're wrong. And you know, I see it with my son's friends. They'll come to our house because they're trying to escape
Yeah, yeah.
their house because their parents don't have those conversations. They're scared to have those conversations.
Yeah, we talk.
And
Good Lord, you get around my wife, you're talking about everything, brother.
oh
If
yeah,
you're over
yeah.
15 years old, hang on. There ain't no
Exactly.
sacred ground around here. That woman is wild. And I've had multiple
Exactly.
people pull me aside and say, everybody
Yeah.
needs it. Because she's just
Exactly.
fearless. She's just like, you people
Yeah.
need to just, she's like, listen, here's the deal. Don't get drunk. Wear a condom. Don't drink and drive. Call your parents if you're drunk. And
Yeah.
everybody's like, all the kids are like, ooh.
Yeah.
That may not
When
be
our
our absolute stance on the whole sex thing, but if you're going to
yeah.
make that mistake, she'll just say, don't put little kids on the earth until you want them. There's
Exactly.
ways to do
Yeah.
this. And she's blasting kids, and they're this tall. And she's like,
Yeah.
just chewing their
Yeah.
ass. She don't even know them.
I
It's
love it.
awesome,
I love it.
right? And she
We have
just goes right at them. But somebody's got to freaking say it, man. Just behavioral, like your example with your kids, great, right?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
one of the other
Yeah.
things I see, and be afraid to make mistakes, or you'll never learn anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then parents who act like they never did, I want to punch some adults.
Mm.
There were some kids in the neighborhood that went into some house that was like half built and busted a bunch of windows out. And there was a bunch of dads standing around. I just cannot believe somebody would do that. And I'm like, y'all never did like anything? Because I've got two friends that were there that I know who've done cocaine and some
Yeah.
crazy stuff, jail, right? And I didn't throw them under the bus in front of everybody. I pulled them aside, brother, you're the drug guy. So you're going to stand there with your hands on your hips and bitch about some kid who's doing dumb stuff. I didn't not agreeing that you bust windows out of the house.
Yeah. Yeah.
But come on, cut the,
Mm-hmm.
don't let them off the
Yep.
hook. If they get caught, they pay their price. You pay. But don't act like you
Don't
were
act
just
like you're
Captain
better.
Buttercups. I mean, come on, man, we've talked.
Exactly. Yeah. We've
So
got
I
something on our
expected my
door.
kids to make mistakes, and they
Yeah.
did. And you just got to go, yeah. Now I say to them, I'm going to tell you what you should do. You go do whatever the hell you want to do.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
They generally don't
Yeah.
now. They did when they were in their teens. They were like, yeah, that guy's a dumbass. And then they come back with a limping, with a broken arm.
Yeah. Well, we have something on our door that when you leave, you have to see it because it's right above the door handle. It says "Return with Honor."
Yeah, that's
And it's
awesome.
just
Right?
yeah. And every once in a while we'll joke around. We'll say something very similar. It's funny that your wife says that, but we're like, hey, don't do drugs, don't have sex,
Yeah,
and don't drive drunk or something like that.
yeah, right.
And we're like, and then we're like, return with honor as they're
Yeah.
closing the door. They get, the kids are like, oh, shut up, dad, whatever. But they know. Yeah, and it's just, and then it's the same thing with like messes in the house. I'm like, I don't care if you make a mess, and then if the kids were here, they'd finish it with, as long as you clean it
Yeah,
up.
you
Like,
can do that.
that
Okay.
I don't care. Make all the messes you want. That's how you learn. I'd rather you do that
I
than
told in front of the women one time. So I have my wife has seven sisters
Mhm.
and three brothers, six sisters. She's the eldest of 10. And when the kids were little, I was the dad that took all the kids on the boat and all that stuff, and all the other dads were just drinking beer, like, "Hey, Uncle Troy's here. Good, we don't have to deal with that." And I would let them do all the dangerous stuff anyway. They would love it. Teach them how to jump out of a boat, and we had a great time. I taught them what Peterson said: teach kids to do dangerous stuff
Yep.
the right way or safely or
Yep.
whatever.
Yeah.
They're going to do it anyway. So I was talking to him one day, and my son had done something stupid, and I said, "You're dragging my damn name around." When you walk into a room, the men should be a little bit scared.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
The women should feel completely safe. Some girl gets drunk and some dude's being a butthole. I don't care what she says to you. Haul her ass home, throw her in the damn door, get the hell out of there. But be that guy. Don't walk in the room and they say, well, we don't know what, I want the men to have a moderate amount of respect for what could happen.
Yep.
And I want all the women to be completely at ease. But you don't drag my freaking name around and do completely stupid crap all the time. You've got, it means something, man. When you walk in, people should have expectations of what they're going to get. And if they don't know you, you want them surprised in a good way, right?
Exactly.
And I've told the women were like, I hit the boys right in the head with that. And I said, there's 6 or 7 of them sitting there. And my wife on your partner goes to the side and said, golly, you were kind of, because I'm always a laughing guy and screwing around, just like I am on YouTube. I laugh a lot and freaking say stupid crap that means nothing and sarcastic all the time, but I got real serious. And she said, that was kind of, didn't you think you scared them? I said, men need to hear it like that. They're men. Talking to women like that don't work. I got it.
Exactly.
So, easy. And she's like, okay. I said, well, I've been a man my whole life. Yep. And the men who've had the most impact on me were the most direct.
Yep.
A couple of them were Vietnam veterans, and they were way direct. Like, really, really violently direct.
Oh, yeah.
But you get in your car. There's a Bill Burr skit where he talks about getting in a fight at a bar, and he says, you drag yourself, you're mad, and all that stuff, and you get in the car, and you go, yeah, probably shouldn't have said that. Nah, that was a little over the top. In reflection.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So I do that all the time with the boys. I just their presence should mean something, and people shouldn't disrespect them, and then they should not be a problem. They should not. If there is a problem with, especially dudes, they need to be a problem, in my opinion. Some stuff goes down. The kids fight MMA and stuff. They've never, I don't think either one of them's ever been in a fight, but I'm like, dude, stuff goes down, you go first, dude. Do not, especially in your 20s. If you make that decision, don't sit there and shove around. Somebody gets bloodied. Take it right from the get-go and get it done. And you know what I think that released them. That's why they don't fight. They've been allowed to hit somebody. So
right. Yeah. And it's funny because I, say the same thing to my kids, and this came from my dad, but, and my kids have gotten into a couple little brawls here and there, but I'm like, as long as I know you didn't start it,
that's right.
You're not the bully.
You can't be picking on people and all that. You can't.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Not allowed.
Yeah. So as long as you don't start it and you finish it, or at least, until someone breaks it up, like I know I can defend you knowing that you didn't start the fight. I don't mess with bullies. Like we don't raise bullies in this house, but
that's right.
But no, that's funny. That's awesome that we have a lot of the similarities.
Oh there. No, I turned them loose, and I think that's why they probably don't. Now they're dangerous.
Yeah.
You better. Thomas boxed for a year, and now he's doing MMA, so he's got the kicks in too, and then he really boxed some pretty solid level of boxing. And Caleb's in all this MMA and all that stuff, and you better have trained or something, because it's not the first 3 strikes are. It's gonna hurt. They said, it's always a leg kick first, knee goes, and I'm like, oh
yeah,
yeah.
Well, that's good. And that's the other thing too is, I've got my youngest son. I've got him in MMA in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's only 9, but I'm like, that's something that no matter what sport you do, I want my son obviously to get on to play professional sports if he wants to, but genetically probably will not happen.
Yeah.
And so, I'm like, what's something that can carry on forever? And Jiu-Jitsu is just something that is like, you'll do that. There's still adults and grandparents that are doing that. So it's something that applies to real life. You're comfortable defending yourself. You're not going to have that freeze up reaction if someone does come at you or your friends. And at the same time, it's physical. It gets good.
Great for sports, right?
And,
I mean, for
Mm-hmm.
football and that kind of stuff, that's got to be great for sports, just to learn to move differently than the status quo in the sports. I'm always surprised.
Exactly.
That I guess maybe we don't know about it. It seems like the NFL guys be doing ballet, jiu-jitsu.
I know some running backs do. Some running backs and wide receivers do stuff like they go and
just
take ballet classes.
Right. just for a different way to move. Because I think there's that one kid from Russia named Lomachenko. He's a boxer, and he was raised doing ballet. And they said the way he moves and strikes had never been seen before because he comes from these crazy angles, but it's from his ballet background and moving sideways and stuff. It's not classic. And so these punches come from crazy angles, right? Because he did ballet. But that's another thing. We'll get off here in a second because we've been running for a while and people are probably bored to death. But one thing I miss, and I think is a great weakness in children these days, is this specialization. God, you don't know if you're going to be a good baseball player at 7, and so you stay in baseball till your 12th grade without playing football or lacrosse or something else. You don't know how fast you are unless you get to run track. I mean, you may not be. I coached baseball for 10 years, and I had one kid who just dying to be a shortstop. He didn't have the arm for it. He did not have he had the hands for it. He did not have the arm for the throw from deep on the edge of the sand. And I told him, but he could bat. Like, he was incredible. I said, you're a first baseman, dude. And you've got the hands. Like, you've got the hand-eye coordination for crazy throws, bouncers, and all that. And you're a first baseman. He goes, I don't know how to play shortstop. I'm like, okay. One of these days you're going to grow and you'll be a perfect first baseman because of your hand-eye. I had another kid who was a killer pitcher, and he was had a huge bat. And I said, dude, you're 12 years old and you're throwing at 55. You're a catcher. You got the bat, you got the cannon, and he had the mental acuity, right, to run the field. No, man, I'm a pitcher. I'm like, no, dude, the catcher gets to see the whole field. You control everything. And with that arm, you can hose some people at second. But it's just like that. And the kids who don't get to do, a lot of kids, I guess, do multiple sports, but it doesn't seem to be as focused. When I was in school, there were 3 seasons. Track and baseball, football, and then they threw soccer in there and some other stuff. And basketball.
Or wrestling. Yeah.
We didn't have wrestling. This is Texas. We don't know what the hell that is. You guys, I wish we did. And we do, but it's really not. Yeah. It's not followed like y'all have in the Midwest and up north and stuff. I wish I would have wrestled. That's a great sport.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
I mean, that's great for you.
Discipline, too. And that's the other thing with jiu-jitsu is they're very disciplined. Like, there's some good martial arts out there, but I don't feel like they translate as well to self-defense in the real world. But the discipline that's taught at a good gym that you take your kids to for wrestling or jiu-jitsu is it's impressive. And
I've been thinking about doing just for a different kind of cardio workout, also to learn a new skill. And I just need to walk in one of them gyms and sign up and pull my purse out and let's go, and do it. That would be that. Okay, man.
Well, is there anything else that we haven't touched on? I mean,
I don't know if you have any more oral questions. You had the Western question, which is absolutely something that comes up all the freaking with my. The one thing I didn't say is from all the arrows we've sold through the Ranch Fairy store, the average arrow mass that people are running is probably 550. Very few people go the next level really hard. You can get 100 grain insert, 125 grain point on pretty much any arrow, and you're 525 to 550. And people are like, well, you're the 650 guy. And I'm like, well, I'm actually an arrow flight and a little bit more momentum. The 650 grain arrow is unbelievable on me. I mean, you can shoot stuff pretty much anywhere with the right broadhead. It's crazy how good it is. But for average people and the amount of things that are available, 200 grains and down broadheads, that's an easy place to get. So you go from 450 and 100 grains heavier, but man, I hammer people on flight and arrow tuning and shoot your broadheads a lot. If you're going to shoot fixed blade broadheads, you got to check that. And so that's another misunderstanding is I'm telling you what, a 700 grain arrow is legit. It goes through stuff. It looks like it's going about 2 miles an hour, and it just chew through stuff. but it takes a lot of work. It's a lot of witchcraft out there, and not witchcraft. It's just the components are hard to get. It's like that's another step in trying to get the stuff, right? You really got to go digging for that stuff. But you can get 150 grain broadheads now. They're everywhere. You can get a little bit of insert mass. Everybody's making them, right? Raise your momentum, not lose a ton of speed, and actually have a parabola that's pretty consistent. So one of the things that's interesting, you probably shoot a slider, right?
Yep.
Look at your tape sometime and look at the gaps as you go further out. It opens up.
I would agree with you. But actually, yes, it does open up, but I will say that usually I'm shooting a little bit faster than my tape because I haven't gone and made a custom tape, which I found that out during Total Archery Challenge, this last weekend, shooting out to, at crazy angles and such.
Sure.
I'm shooting a couple yards fast, but no, I agree that it does open up as you go.
So that's a aerodynamic drag thing. The faster you go, the more it drags. And the slower you go, you have to deliver it. So it can't go zero. Got that.
Yeah.
But when you start in the archery business, to go faster, we take mass out. There's no other way to really do it. I mean, you can erase poundage, but you don't really get that much return for 5 pounds. Yeah. You add 5 pounds of draw weight, you don't get 10 feet per second. I mean, it's not 20 would be ideal. If you could get 5 pounds of draw weight, 20 feet per second, wow, but it just doesn't work that way. But the faster you go, the more they drag squared. The velocity, the aerodynamic drag equation on NASA website, it's all over the place. It's mostly about airplanes. But that's why the lighter arrows tends to have a parabola that's more consistent over distance. It's like more rainbows in the exact example, because that makes it looks like an arch is like this, right? But a rainbow is even. An arrow under 450 grains tends to go like that. So as you get away, it shoots real flat for about, from what I can tell, about 40 or 50. And then when you get out there, it starts to really lope as your range goes on. And I did a video on this where I was shooting 40, and I put a 425 grain arrow and a 650 grain arrow on a slider, but I launched them on their parabolas. So one was a little flatter and one was arching a little more. And then I misjudged the range by 5 yards. So I went to 45, but shot for 40 like I didn't know what I was doing. There was a 1 inch difference between the two arrows. Low. 1 point, I think a 1.5. So the light arrow hit like 3 inches low and the heavy arrow hit 4.5 inches low. I was shocked. I thought it was going to be a lot. I really did. And I was wrong. And that's a combination of the momentum of the projectile pushing against the air and the aerodynamic drag working in favor of the heavier projectile going down range.
So again, and this is, and I know a lot of what you put out has to do with more eastern, southern, whitetail distances, hog distances.
That's 95% of my audience.
Right. Yeah. And which makes sense. And again, why a lot of my audience is Western guys, and why I wanted to hit on those questions, because I know people out West watch your stuff and then they go and throw on a 600 grain arrow or whatever. And then they're like, well, I'm going to shoot an animal at 70 yards. And they're like, why am I, misjudged by five yards at 70? That's drastic. Right. And so what you're saying is the 40 yard, and that makes sense. The 40 yard versus 45. Have you done that past?
I need to back up. I haven't done it. Okay. I thought the results were going to be insane, and they weren't. So I need to back up, and I think it's going to continuously widen. I absolutely, I do. But like I said, I put them on their own shot line. So with a slider, I've zeroed for 40 with a lighter arrow, and then I slid the slider down and found 650. And I use 650 just because that's Ed's number, right, for the bone breaking threshold. I bet you 450 and 550 would be. I bet it would be tight.
Marginal. Yeah.
Oh, and you'd gain a ton of momentum out of that. And then you put a fixed blade on the front so it doesn't have any resistance at impact. That's one of the things I'm going to put this in your head and let you noodle this a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Your success with mechanicals has been fine. So that's the part I can't figure out. I did a whole video on this too. So when you read the packages for mechanical broadheads, there's numbers like 40, 50, 60 pounds of kinetic energy is recommended.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that you're giving up that kinetic energy when you buy them?
Mm. That's a good question. I haven't,
and I don't
thought
know
about
what
that.
it means, and I don't know
Yeah.
what you get for those numbers. But here's how I looked at that. It took me, this is last year. I went, oh, that's kind of scary. Maybe it explains some stuff, right? Because I'm trying to figure out why they're so inconsistent. You've had pretty good luck, apparently, but you don't see that on YouTube.
Yeah.
Mechanical broadhead performance on YouTube's all over the place.
Yeah.
So, but then you'll see a pass through or two like you've had, and then you'll see guys who can't get an arrow to go 4 inches into stuff. And it's weird.
Well,
so if
for
you're
me,
shooting,
for me, it has to do with shot placement, because when you see those people that miss, either they're high up in the tree stand and they're hitting the spine, right?
or the
So they're hitting
scapula.
high, or the scapula, they're aiming too far forward.
Mm-hmm.
And in my mind, and you know obviously about anatomy, but I'm like, there's so many goodies behind the scapula.
Not really.
You don't need to be aiming at the, but if you have a mechanical, you got a 2-inch cut in through 2 lungs, like there's a lot of lung there that you can poke through, right?
It's a third of the kill zone.
Right. I would agree with you on that. Like there is some of that vital V area.
Mm.
Yeah. And so you do need to know your equipment as well. Like, what are you aiming for? And so with a mechanical, most people talk about the bigger cut. I would agree with, obviously there's a bigger cut with a mechanical, but you cannot put it through the tough areas like the scapula. That's not the goal, right? With the mechanical. And I think that,
what do you do with the people who bonk and stuff? What if you pull the shot and stuff?
Well, and that's what I'm saying is you need to know your equipment, and you're
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
to the people
Yeah.
that don't practice as much, right? And so if you want something that's going to poke a hole and go and penetrate as far as possible, then that's one thing. But for me, for example, I'm more than happy. This is actually the mechanical that I use. So this one is a glue-in version of it, but it's all steel. Right. And then it's got what I call like a mini iron wheel on the front. So heaven forbid it doesn't open, which I haven't ever had that happen.
So that's the one you've had the pass-throughs with?
Yep.
Oh, well, that one's actually moderately logical with the cutting nose on it.
And then it's a half moon. So it's like when it goes through, it doesn't have a ton of resistance.
No, it has a ton of resistance.
Well, I'm sorry. It's not like flat, right? It's not straight. It's got more of that curved. And then on top of that, these are meant to bend. They're not a super hardened steel where it's going to break. So even if it does end up bending, yes, it's causing that more resistance, but you're not losing the cutting.
I've not seen the one with the cutting point on the front. That's interesting. Okay. I don't keep up with it.
So it's more of a hybrid.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more of a hybrid. This is from Evolution Outdoors. And I don't shoot mechanicals. I don't shoot broadheads, period, that have aluminum. Right? That's just not my thing. I prefer steel. Just
no,
because
you better
I want
prefer
it to be
steel.
a better material. Yeah. And so, but I put it through a whitetail at 40 yards. I hit her, like you were saying, your buddy hit the Neil guy, which is obviously different. Giannis hitting the Neil guy. Whitetail and Neil guy are very different. One's definitely not as tough. But I hit her right. She was hard quartered away, 40 yards, hit her right in front of her hind quarter. And my buddy was like, dude, you got to get another arrow in there. I was like, nah, because I was aiming for the exit. Right. I always picture that anatomy and I aimed for where I want it to come out. And it did go in steep quartered away, but it ran. And I don't know how I missed guts, to be honest with you. I think it went high enough that it nicked the spine and went through, but it hit all the goodies. It hit the lungs, didn't hit the heart, but it popped the diaphragm, hit the liver, hit the lungs, and poked out the other side. Now, the full arrow didn't pass all the way through.
Yeah, that's still good penetration, though.
Yeah, the full broadhead was out the other side. So I had 2 holes. She ran 20 yards, tried to go uphill, and tumbled back downhill. And so for me, I was like, well, that went through all the freaking body cavity. So for me on a whitetail, I'm great with that, in that shot. Now, I probably would not take that shot on an elk with a mechanical. And so for me personally, I have 2 types of broadheads in my quiver, depending on the shot that I get. If I'm self-calling, for example, and I know an elk's going to come in, I'm going to have a fixed head because that frontal shot,
You're
I
going to
don't want
take
to
the
shoot a
1/4 2
mechanical.
shot because they're not going to be walking backwards.
Yeah, exactly. But if he's coming in broadside or quartered away,
You're
and
going to
not
change
hard
arrows in the
quartered
heat of
away.
the moment?
Well, and that's the thing, is that I usually walk around with a mechanical, but if I'm calling, which is really the
Oh,
only
that's
time that
when you
he's going to come.
change.
Yes, it's when
Wow,
I
you're way
know
more
they're going to be
reasonable
coming.
than the rest of the world. You know, Tom Miranda did that forever.
Yeah, and so
He shot a
that's just
Muzzy, and then he shot whatever mechanical he was sponsored by.
yeah, exactly. And so and on my my broadhead choice, I've got an iron will. This year I'm going to shoot the wides, single bevel with bleeders,
Mm-hmm.
vented, and that's going to be my fixed head that's in my quiver.
Does
I
it
have two of
fly
those.
70 yards for you?
Yeah, it's flying
The
great.
wide does?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
What's your setup?
And surprisingly, the solid wides are louder than the vented wides.
Yeah,
I
don't worry
don't know
about that.
what
I
it
shoot
did to
feathers,
them.
man. My arrows scream like crazy. That
Oh,
doesn't matter anyway.
well, and I agree with you. Again, at shorter distances, I'm not too concerned about that. It's when it's that 70-yard shot and they're kind of like, "Oh, what's that?" and then they duck. You know, that's something that is a factor for me anyway with my vane choice and my broadhead choice.
What? So you're shooting 70 to 80 pounds. What's the arrow spine are you flying them on?
On my 80-pound bow, I'm messing around with it. Both the 300s and the 250s, depending on where I put the weight, they fly pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
On my 70-pound bow, I've got 300s.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and they're flying great. I actually just threw new strings on the 80-pound bow, and we actually cranked it down to, I think, 82. And I put a 300 spine arrow. Right now it's flying. It's a 400 grain arrow, so it's definitely a lot lighter than what you talk about. But we put it through the very first shot, bullet hole with fletchings on it. So I'm like, now I got to take it out to distance, obviously, and I put
shoot
strings on,
broadheads.
so I want to make sure. Yeah, exactly. But
Everybody
at least
listening
the
to
paper
this, you
beautiful.
got to shoot your broadheads to the maximum shooting distance. If they do not behave, you need to figure something out.
Yep.
And you can email me or hit me on Instagram, and I'll help you. I don't care what you're shooting. But if your broadheads are weird or the groups open up as you go further out, it's going to cost you. If your broadheads wander 4 inches on target, you're going to have an animal move on you, and it's going to be 8. And you're going to be sad. So I don't care if you're shooting 400 grains in a mechanical or whatever. Hit me up, and I'll help you get your arrows flying. It's not worth it, man. It is not worth. You just don't get that many times out in the woods to have something moderately half-assed hurt you. If you're 4 inches off and they move 4 inches, which ain't much. If an animal's going to duck, it's usually 7. But if they just take a little step at 70, you're 4 inches off and you're 4 inches off again. And somehow it's never forward. If we can make an arrow go towards the front of the animals all the time, it'd be awesome. That would be $1 million deal.
Yep.
But we can't.
Yep, no.
So you're totally practical. The calling thing is real smart. Oh man. You ought to build a 600 grain wampum for calling. Just break one shoulder.
Just put it right through them. Yeah.
And blast them. Because
yeah,
if you take the shot back on a 1/4 2 elk, that's a one long gut shot most of the time. It's a long day, man.
Well, and I toyed around with the idea. So I have 4 mil arrows. They're actually sitting up on. I need to fletch them. Sitting up on the rack right there. But with the glue-in system from Evolution, they're running about 480.
Oh, that's real good.
And I could, if I went, because I work with Victory, they have a stainless webbing that meshes in with the carbon, so it's like a stainless steel carbon hybrid, and that's their VAP TKO SS. And so I haven't messed around with those, but I could easily get up to 550 with those arrows in a glue-in system.
Did they have any heavy? Did they have screw-ins for the glue-in system?
Well, so you could put. I could put the component. I just like the components of a glue-in system a lot better. And
the components of the glue-in system make all the sense in the world, and that's a badass way to do it because they can't come apart and it won't unscrew on you. Right. I love that idea. Can you get more mass in the front? Can you screw in?
Not much of a hinge point, but you can with
Does
the
it have glue-ins
glue-in system.
Like I have this. I used to put glue-ins in my shafts.
Yeah.
Do
so
they have
he's
anything
got,
like that to glue into the back of the broadhead? That'd be awesome. Just go forward to
well,
center.
so he makes bigger versions. I have a 180 grain on the glue in system, but he's got 200s. He's got what he calls his dangerous game system. I think it goes up to 300 grains for the glue in system. And they make fixed heads and mechanicals up to that weight. So
You got to throw the 200 on there just for fun.
yeah,
What I'm getting at is it is more advantageous aerodynamically to throw it up front than it is to put it in the arrow.
Right.
Because the arrows are long. So what you want is this little compact, nasty, super heavy little spot that wants to travel and pull the shaft.
Yep.
That's a very simple way to put it, but that's exactly what occurs. So making a really heavy arrow, like a full metal jacket that's 14 grains per inch, and putting a light point on there, you're asking that shaft to hit absolutely perfect. And if it hits a little sideways, all that mass wants to travel. Like the mass is the mass. So if a really heavy arrow hits and is a little sideways, that mass wants to do that. It doesn't want to follow the point because it's long and heavy. But if you put it up front, wow, you got to call that guy and tell him to drill a hole in the back of that thing and put screw-ins in it and make one.
Yeah. No,
Not on his P&L. Make one broadhead and put a screw-in feature in the back. That way you could just screw around with it.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, it's he makes some really cool stuff. The Evolution Broadhead, or Evolution Outdoors is the name of the company. Dale, he's just an awesome guy.
Good.
But yeah, it's anyway, it's all interesting, man. I absolutely love it. I've got a camera now that I can do some slow-mo with, and I've got I think it was my 400 grain arrows. I tend to run around that 16 to 18 FOC up front. I don't technically calculate it every time, but it's usually what it lands at with the way.
How the hell are you getting 18% forward to center out of a 400 grain arrow?
Let me see if I have one right here. Well, so I've got 125 grain head, 30 grain half out titanium, 15 grain collar. So what is that up front? It's almost 175 basically up front out of 400 grain. So let's see here.
I did expect you to be around 14. I got to go play around with some lighter arrows too and do some more forward to thinner stuff. My big wampum arrows are 28%. That takes a lot of freaking work.
Yeah, I'll have to look this up. But while I'm doing that, I just I took a video of my arrow I was shooting at some high windage stuff just to see what happened. And the arrow is flying great out of the bow. It hits the wind because I'm sitting almost in a wind tunnel in a way. Like this way I've got buildings on either side, and then there's a crosswind past the buildings.
Oh, so it jumps into the wind. Yeah.
So I shot about 30 yards, and then it hits the wind, and my arrow does this number right here, where it's flying straight, and then it just kicks real hard, and then it corrects and goes right into the target and landed straight. And it blew my mind going back and watching. I'm like, that's my arrow, and the arrow was almost 90 degrees from the target, and then landed back down.
As long as the animal's at the end of the shot, you're good. If he's in the middle, you're not good.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know how much of that was the vanes and how much of it was the FOC or a mixture of both, correcting that arrow flight, mid-flight. But the arrow's flying out straight, so it's not the bow, it was the wind. But the fact that it corrected so much before it landed into the target, just that blew my mind watching that, and it got me super intrigued.
Most likely what occurred is the point stayed on the shot line and the tail kicked, or it would have left the shot. So your point stayed on the shot line, and then the vanes got back behind it. That's most likely what occurred, or it would have taken off. Right? It would have taken off somewhere and ended up in a Pluto or whatever in the field.
So I'm doing the calculation real quick here. I've got a little calculator that'll help me out. Let's see. Oh, shoot. Grains per inch. I think it's 7. That's a super light arrow. I think it's right at 7.1. We'll go with that.
Because most 300s are in the 8 grain range, but that might be the super light stuff.
Yeah. Let's see. that. Range 3, 4. Wait. What's a typical 8? Do you run the IP Nox from AE?
No,
7,
the
6 or
veins,
7 grains. No, the Nox.
they're about 8 or 10.
Yeah. So with the stats that I've got here, I'm even running 4 veins in the back. It's coming out to about 400 grains, and I'm at 18% FOC.
Mm.
Yep. So it's a stupid light arrow. I mean, it's 7 grains per inch.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's 7.1 grains per inch. On these Victory Rip XVs. I think it's one of the lightest grains per inch 300 spine arrows out.
Boy, that'd be a killer arrow to put a 400 grain point on. Holy smokes, you'd have a unicorn.
That would blow my mind.
It'd be a unicorn, man.
That'd be funny to see how that flies.
Ed said when he finally got the components to get his shafts above 30% forward to center. When Ed started the study, there was only wood and aluminum. There wasn't carbon. He got the lightest flight arrow that he could find anywhere and had them shipped over to Australia.
Yeah.
And when he got his FOC over 30%, he said that they were almost unstoppable.
So that putting a 400 grain tip on that would bring it to about 671, and that would be 32.7%.
That's a unicorn. That's a Cape Buffalo all day.
Oh, golly.
Right
I might have to bump up the 250 spines,
no,
though.
it wouldn't.
Probably
Yeah,
would.
that's the hard part is you have to
weaken
spine up possibly a 200 to get it to fly.
Yeah.
But those are unicorn arrows when you can do that. And then you put something long on there like that. That doesn't stop. Right.
It's basically a spear at that point.
It's a spear. It's funny when I go, I've done some talks and stuff. I did a talk at Stanton's camp, and I break out my big boy arrows with feather fletch, which nobody does. The tough head, and they're 28% forward to center and 715 and pass it around. People are just like, everybody says, this is a spear. And I'm like, yup. It's a flying spear.
Exactly. That's awesome.
It's been fun to shoot stuff with. It's just awesome. That's one of the things we started out talking about was, go try stuff and see what happens. I just decided to try it. The heaviest arrow I've killed with is 1,030. I did it 3 times. I shot one pig right in the nuts, and it came out right here. I shot one pig broadside and went through him like he was 220 pounds. It's going like 170. I mean, and distance was critical. Thank God for deer feeders, right? I got to put them right where I want them. You would not Western big game hunt with that. And I turned this thing loose, and it just goes, and just choop, and just threw him like he wasn't there. Just whoop.
You grab your popcorn and you're waiting.
Yeah, get some popcorn, have a beer, choop, just speared him literally right through him. It's been hilarious. I want to build one about 800 grains and start head shooting stuff. I think my big arrows will do it. Head shoot a pig like 10 yards, just right the side of the head, just whack.
Yeah.
Just to abuse them a little bit. I mean, that's what they're for. God put them on the earth to be abused. Them and baboons, which I'll be doing in a month. I'll be shooting baboons in a month, so that'll be fun.
That sounds like fun. That's awesome, man. Well, I definitely have appreciated. This will be the longest podcast that I've put out up to this point. So
well, we went a lot of places. That's what's important, right? We actually talked about stuff that mattered, and arrows and stuff just for fun. Who cares?
Yeah,
none of that stuff really matters. Just for fun.
And I love what you said. Like, go around mess with stuff, and if it works for you, it works.
I'm not stopping the guys that it's working. But if you have trouble, and you've had some of the experiences other people had, and crazy redirects with mechanicals and no penetration, hey, I'll help you. I won't. If you want to go crazy, we'll build the baddest thing you want to build, but you're probably going to end up shooting a Madness Stinger 150 with 50 or 100 grains up front, or a Madness Black Hornet, something simple, something you can get at Bass Pro Shops. But I want you to have your arrows flying right and all this third axis stuff and all the detail you're talking about. That matters.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta have. This does not overcome arrow mass as far as getting through hard things. But if your knock has got to be behind the point, and if it's like this, it's going that way at impact.
Yep. That's definitely. I agree with you on that. If your arrow's flying crooked and you don't have something sharp on the end of it, it doesn't matter what your poundage is. It doesn't matter
Nope.
what your grains are. It doesn't
The
matter what your
knock is going
fletchings look like.
sideways at impact. It's going to be flying in the air.
Yep.
It's going to hit, and the knock is 30 inches back, and it's going to leave her.
And I think that's the other thing too with people that shoot mechanicals and get deflections.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder how many, and it's hard to gather that information because one, you don't know where they shot unless they videoed it. And they're how many times have you talked to someone like, dude, I put it right in the pump house, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right there. And you get up to it and it's like in the guts. You're like, either you don't know your anatomy or you're a little excited, you know, like, so
I think the
people that come in, they
redirects,
say
I've talked
that.
to the hunting public at depth about this off camera, just because that's how it worked out. And
Yeah.
back when they used to shoot when I was shooting mechanicals, I was shooting a 400 spine arrow on a 70-pound bow because I was going to go fast, and that's what the shop told me. So we paper tuned it. Fixed blade ain't flying because it bends too much. And I shot mechanicals. And what I think is happening, let me see if I got big. Oh, it broke. Well, my structural integrity on my point's no good on my practice arrow. I used to have a really cool point on here. But nonetheless, here's the arrow shaft. Here's the fletchings. What I know is occurring when you shoot under-spined arrows just to go fast. You can sort of tune them. But they're going like that long.
Yeah.
Because they're super soft. So what happens is as they travel, they go like this, and they're wobbling all the way down range. And what I think is happening, I can't prove it, it's a high-speed camera. I think the broadheads are hitting like this, or that, or that. Remember, it is rotating.
Because it's still,
It's rotating and bending. So it's really doing this and rotating. So it's not driving on a stick that's stiff and straight. It's bent, and it hits. One of the blades deploys, and the other one doesn't.
Yep.
And it binds up and goes wherever it wants to go. I think that's what I don't know that, but it's a
but
pretty good guess.
It's hard to say, but theoretically, the idea in my mind when people say they've got deflections, and I'm like, look, I put that broadhead through the rib cage, like it punched through. I've got pictures of the hole where the actual mechanical blades went through the rib cage of that doe after it had gone through the body cavity.
Yep.
So but it also, like, I know my arrows are flying straight, and that's the thing is,
and they're pretty stiff. You're shooting a 300 or a 250.
Yeah,
they're not.
I've always sat
arrows.
at the 300, and there's one time last year where I actually had to bump up to 250s, just the way the cams were a little bit more aggressive. But I'm usually right at that 300 mark, and I don't lighten the spine to lighten weight. If I'm going to lighten weight, I cut it out somewhere else, right?
Yep.
That's just how I've always done it. I've got a great shop with Wild Arrow. They're amazing guys, some of the best in the country, I'd say, and they know what they're doing. So they've always kept me on the right path.
That's good. We have a great shop here too. The guys here are great. They don't care if you want to shoot 1,000 grains. They'll set it up. They'll tune you.
Yep.
There's like, you want to buy stuff?
The thing is, with those mechanicals, I'd say it's shot placement. People are misleading when they say, "Oh, I got a deflection because of this," or their arrow's flying crooked, or they bump something, they hit something in the flight of the arrow. You know.
Well, there's also some mechanical platforms that are.
I'd agree with that. If you're shooting a quality mechanical broadhead, that steel components is sharp.
There's 2 or 3 of them. I would say, okay.
Yeah.
Man, a lot of them are just super thin blades made out of really light aluminum. They've got punch points on them that are horrific.
Yeah.
And the ones that there's 3 blades that open up like this backwards. Oh, come on.
So I guess eliminating all of those things, let's say this. If you're shooting a quality, so steel or titanium, mechanical, if your arrow's flying good and you're spined right, which means your arrow's flying good and is sharp, it's all down to placement. And I can't say that 100%. Obviously, you haven't tested that. But for me personally, I haven't had an issue, and I've accounted for all of those other things. I know all of those other things are in line. And that's why on that bull, after the 70-yard shot, it punched through both lungs, liver, and a little bit of guts. And the arrow was buried that far into the ground behind him. He ran 30 yards, hunched over, bedded back down. It took him a little while to die because it was a further back shot than I would have liked. But I also did that because he was bedded and slightly quarter two, right? He expired 40 yards from where I shot him. Had no idea what was going on. And so for me, again, going back to all those other factors need to be accounted for. And then you want to have a sharp broadhead you know, if you don't have time to account for all of those things, I'd almost say maybe don't even go hunting this year.
Well,
Maybe take some time
you might want to
to
think
go.
about that.
Yeah. Yeah, just like you got to take the time. I personally feel, I know hogs are one thing, they're a nuisance, but on a big game animal, we owe the ethical shot to the animal. Like, we're going to
I'll
give
tell
them the
you what,
best
dude,
death.
it's frustrating. I've had 2 guys lose big hogs this year, and it pissed me off.
Hmm.
14 yards.
Yeah.
14.
Well, there you go. Well, but I'd say if you're going to shoot with a bow, if you're going to put the time into that, know that you have to put time into it to get your stuff shooting right. If you don't have all the time in the world, don't tinker. Get your stuff set up and just go with that, and
Yeah,
know
right.
that it's set up right. But definitely, I feel like personally we owe it to the animals to shoot our bow to the best of our ability and
And
know
it's
our
just frustrating when
standards.
they get away. Like I said, one of the
Mhm.
guys, I've got a friend who's a 3D champion out of one of the Western states. I don't remember which one, but he's got the belt buckle to show it.
Mm.
He's 1 for 4 at deer feeders with me. And he shoots a long way. He's got great form. He's got the clicker deal that y'all shoot, that fancy ass clickety clickety click thumb thing and all that. He looks good. I
Yeah.
love you. I love you, man. You know who it is if you're listening to this. But he's 1 for 4, and he hasn't shot over 20
Really?
yards. All
Hmm.
the hits have been high. And then we
Man,
lost
that's
one this
rough.
year, another one this year at 14 yards. It was dead. He was quartering away, and he just shot 6 inches high. And those things, because of their anatomy, you can't do what
Yeah.
you talk about on elk. You
Right.
can't, if you shoot them through the middle or behind the crease, there's nothing there.
Mm-hmm.
Their stomachs are absolutely enormous. They just don't. So what you have to do with a mechanical broadhead on feral hogs is you have to wait till they're quartered away.
Yep.
There's no other option because their lungs are tucked way forward. It just is what it is. I just found out this year that bears' anatomy is way back.
Mm.
I
Yeah. It's
actually
middle of the middle.
saw a guy who put a bear on a table and cut it open like I do, and it was, 4 inches behind the crease.
Yep. Now, isn't that weird though? Because I always remember that, and especially when I shoot 3D targets of bears, you know, the 12 ring, the 10 ring, the 8 are all pushed forward like a
Mm-hmm.
deer. But I always say to myself, it's middle of the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Like that phrase just rings true every time. It's middle of the middle, and especially if you've got a big old boar,
Mm-hmm.
where it's sagging, you know,
Mm-hmm.
maybe even a little bit low, middle of the middle, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because it's just sagging down because he's so,
Yeah,
you know, big
I
and
haven't
whatnot.
hunted them.
But
Maybe I'll
yeah,
do that one of these days. No,
yeah.
I'll be fishing. As I get older, I'm going fishing. I'm not going to hunt anymore. I'd rather go
All right,
fishing.
last question before I get you off here, man.
Okay.
Top water or sinker bait?
I throw all of them, but everybody loves topwater. There's nothing better to catch them on. But I'm a real active fisherman, so I like plugs.
Okay.
I don't like throwing worms, but I do it. I don't like
Mm-hmm.
throwing swim baits, but I do it. If they'll eat it, I'll
Yeah.
throw it. But I'm a hard bait fisherman, so jerk baits and topwaters.
Nice.
That's what I
I
prefer.
grew up doing my grandpa's favorite was it was called a skeeter pop. But I can't remember what they've called it now. They've transitioned the name, but it looks like a little minnow that as you jerk it, it makes that popping sound at the top of the water.
Mm-hmm.
And that, man, there's nothing like that or a trout hitting your fly off the top of the water. I can't.
I have not
Like,
gotten into the fly fishing thing because I already
oh
have enough
man.
addictions, and I'm not doing it. I will go. I'll be divorced if I get a fly rod, so I'm not doing it. Can't
You
do it.
know, but you won't get the divorce papers if you're out there on the water and don't have cell service.
I don't know. But she has guns. I taught her to shoot guns, so it's not safe
Yeah,
around here.
that's awesome. That's awesome, man. Well, cool. Well, I appreciate it, man. I definitely I got the questions that I needed answered because again, I feel like our industry is so small, even though it may seem big to people that aren't
No,
working
it's
in,
tiny.
you know, it's so small. Everyone knows everyone, and I don't feel like there's enough of a pie for there to be any kind of beef whatsoever between people. And so
Mm-hmm.
when people do say, well, he doesn't know this and that, I'm like, well, yeah, but actually I've never heard Troy talk about this or that. So I wanted to get Troy on to
From the
talk to
horse's
Troy.
ass.
Yeah, exactly. To talk to Troy, not Ranch Fairy, and hear what Troy had to say about his ideas on certain things, and you answered them very well. I appreciate that. So,
I appreciate the questions, and if you're
yeah,
working, it's working. If it's not, call me.
exactly. So, where can people find you at? We'll leave it there.
I got lucky. Total, not no marketing plan. Came up with the name Ranch Fairy because that's what I call myself about the ranch. As the ranch manager, I started joking around with the family and saying, "I'll fly down there and fix all your stuff." So you just type Ranch Fairy into the Googler or whatever you're using, and you'll find me. I'm on Instagram under Ranch Fairy, and then YouTube under Ranch Fairy. And I've got a Facebook page, but it's got 5,000 followers, and I'd have to change the account, and I don't care. So don't look there. Old people go to Facebook. Don't do that. That's for old people like me who think they're cool. So Instagram, YouTube, all that stuff. Hit me on messages if you have questions. And like I said earlier, if you're having some 420 grain aerofly problems, call me. I don't care. I'm not going to tell you, well, you should be shooting 550. No, we got to get your aeroflying straight first. So worry about that next if you want to play with that. But I get 500 new inbound messages a month between May and October on arrows. Nobody says you're the best pig shooter ever. Love their anatomy lesson. It's all trying to get arrows to fly. And I will help you, and we have solutions for that.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Good stuff. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, of course, man. I love bringing on new people and, getting to talk to people about their different ideas on things that I love to do. So, with that being said, guys, I'm going to leave all the links down below where you can find Troy at the Ranch Fairy. And if you got any questions for him, or if you have any questions for me as well, feel free to reach out. We'll leave all those links down below. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. And like I always say, guys, get out, live your life, and love it. Hope you enjoyed that podcast and got to see a different side of Troy than on a lot of podcasts and videos that he's been on. I wanted to hit and ask those couple questions just to clarify some things for people, because there's Western hunters that are listening to Troy. There's Eastern hunters. There's a lot of people that go in and find his information interesting. And I wanted to clarify some of these things in a non-confrontational way and enjoy a good conversation with Troy, because he has many other facets to his life. And archery is a small part of it that has turned big just because of his differing ideas from maybe mainstream. So hope you enjoyed this podcast, guys. Also, if you want to support monetarily, use the links down below. I really appreciate it. You support the partners, you get yourself some gear at the best pricing possible, and you're supporting me and my family here at the RedBeard Outdoors household. And if you are not in the market to purchase any gear or not to, help financially, absolutely understand that. Guys, for your sake and for your sake, for everyone around you, go get into the first Phorm Outdoors challenge, the fall challenge. Get started ahead of time on your goals. Knock the rest of this year out with a bang. I want to see you over there in the challenge with me. Join me in that. And last but not least, leave a review, subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow along wherever it is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc., wherever it is that you choose to listen. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. And those reviews are free, easy to do. And if you have any questions on how to do those reviews, shoot me a message. I will help you out with that, because it helps way more than you know. It takes very little of your time and no money. So all of that, guys, are ways that you can support the channel as we continue to grow and move towards the end of 2024 and towards 2025. Have a great one, guys. And of course, get out, live your life, and love it.